So talk to me about this moment here.
Oh yeah. So pause it for just a second. So the way the trials work is they take the top 3 from the event. So the top 3 go on to the Olympics. And our event is so stacked, literally like the top 6 or 7 people could go on and really be medal contenders for any other country.
Yeah, over like the last 15, 20 years, any given year, on the low end, America would have like 5 of the top 10, 11 shot putters in the world. On the high end, maybe 7 or 8 of the top 11 or 12.
So I'm walking into this, like the 5th round, so I basically walked into the final round, and C.J. Hunter, I think, was ahead of me. Andy Bloom was ahead of me. C.J. was the only one ahead of me, I think, at the time. I think I was in 2nd at the time. And we had John Godina, a 3-time world champion, still throwing, and he was having a little bit of an off day. Andy Bloom, who'd won NCAAs the year before me and was a silver or bronze medalist in the World Championships a couple years before. Kevin Toth, all these guys that had huge PRs of over 70 feet were all kind of lining up for this big, huge final push to make this team. And Andy goes out there and launches one and PRs and confirms his spot on the team as the 5th. Like he was 5th and he goes into 1st. And so I bumped down into 3rd position. So again, I'm on the bubble, so to speak, because John Godina's coming in for his final throw, and he's a 3-time world champion, and everybody's like, he is going to make this team. And he goes out, and I think he fouls. And then I'm up, and I'm like, I know I've already made the team. Now it's just, what position am I going to go in? And it was one of those moments, like I still get like goosebumps when I think about it. Like when I go into the circle, like I don't know who I become or who I really am, but like the moment the world just stops. And
that was your first round throw.
This Chad showing the competition here, but this is it right here. That's Andy throwing his PR. Yeah. So once John takes his throw here, I know I've actually made the team, but it's just a question of what position I'm going to be. And this is just one of those moments where you find you find that energy, and then you get into the zone. And I just remember stepping in the circle, the world just went completely quiet, and I was so locked in on this one specific task of throwing this shot put. And when I finally exploded back to life, like the shot put came down, and it was an Olympic trials record, and I found myself throwing 72 feet 7 inches. I had won the trials and was now the favorite going into the 2000 Olympics. And Andy's like 6'2", so I almost jumped over him on that.
So this is a good time to talk about something we're going to talk about later, but this controlled aggression, and anyone who watched you through your track career, there's Adam Nelson and there's Nelly, and you flip this switch, and you're a great showman and all this stuff, but the shot put is very technical. Like it's a very fine line to walk. How aggressive can you be? How fired up can you be? But how can you also focus on your technique? That's something I think powerlifters, weightlifters, they struggle with. Can you talk about sort of harnessing that controlled aggression?
Yeah, so a lot of people have asked me about my pre-throw routine because I do get very excited, very fired up, and I think it all started, I don't know what age it was, but I mean ever since I was probably watched too many Rocky movies when I was growing up. I don't know what it was, but I just always felt like if you can put yourself like into the moment and live specifically in that moment and have all your energy like focused on whatever that strength skill is. It was always strength for me because I thought, that was where I was. And whether it was in wrestling or whether it was in football or whoever I was competing against or whatever the objective was, I knew that if I could like force myself to get so focused in that one moment that I could do superhuman things. I always believed that we have superhuman powers. I know that's kind of crazy. But I read this book when I told you I was the weird kid that spent all these hours in the weight room under the bar. But I read this book in 8th grade that was called The Athlete's Guide to Mental Training. And they talked a lot about visualization. And again, as an 8th grader, you don't necessarily get the full picture of things, but you glom onto certain things. So I always had this mental image of who I was when I was competing. Like, if you looked at me, like I'm 6 feet tall, 6 feet tall, 6 feet tall.
People, they shrink as they get older. So.
Yeah, I'm not, 6 feet tall. And anyway, but I always had this strong image of who I was. But if you looked at me relative to my competitors, I was 6 feet tall, 257 towards the end of my career, I got as heavy as 267 or 268 with a couple of days over 270, which didn't feel good. But mostly somewhere around that 260 mark, and most of my competitors were, 40 to 70 pounds bigger and 3 or 4 inches taller. So I never saw myself as smaller than they were. Like, in my head, I was bigger than all of them. And in 2000, the process was still a little bit raw, and I got it. It was refining and refining. But literally, I would walk into a circle, and I would see this superhuman version of myself, like, do whatever it is that I was about to do. And eventually, I got so good at it that it wasn't this superhuman version of myself. It was me stepping in, and I could feel how this person was, how this person moved, what he thought. And like, when I get into that character, when I get into that mode, and it really is an extension of who I am. When I get into that mode, like, there's nothing I can't do, and I there's no doubts. There's just pure, like, what is the task at hand, and I'm going to crush it. There's nothing else in that moment, and that interferes with that. And over time, I started developing processes. I've worked with sports psychologists, sports hypnotherapists, and a bunch of other people to help refine this process. And in 2001, it kind of happened, where like I fell into the right sort of like rhythm with it. Like, this is how I'm going to set it up now. We were at a meet in Portland, Oregon, and it was the shot put sector was outside of the track. And so we didn't have a lot of room to move around, and the people were surrounding the shot put sector. And so I went out into the sector, and I was like, I'm going to put on a show. One, because it helps me. Like, this is all, like, if people aren't entertained by what we do, we are failing as performers. And I know a lot of people say, well, you're not a performer, you're an athlete. That's bullshit. You're both. And if you don't know who you are when you perform, like what you want the crowd to experience, like, I want them to experience the greatness of throwing, the greatness of whatever it is that I'm doing. And while diehard fans can look at that and see a performance and be like, oh, that's awesome, we don't thrive or survive off the diehard fans. You thrive off being, like, transcending whatever the boundaries are that are set for you ahead of time. So that was my goal. Is like, how can I get that 4-year-old kid to be excited about this? Well, shoot, I was a huge fan of WWE when I was little, right? Like Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man Randy Savage and all those guys, come on, and it was all a show, right? Yeah. So this part of it was showmanship, like, no joke, but the other part was I also knew that as I got super fired up and super excited, I had to take a little bit of steam off, like, because I was at too high. I needed to come down to, like, maybe 90% instead of like this 100%. So I'd get out there and I'd do my thing and get the clap going. And the trigger for me to get into that, exactly. The trigger for me, the thing that I anchored it to, anchored like this transition from me to this superhuman version of myself, was when I'd pull my shirt off. So when the shirt would come off, boom, that was my trigger. And once you practice the act of anchoring, like, a trigger, like, really, like, get that down, you come into this person, and that person does whatever it's been programmed to do. And so I was on autopilot at that point, and people were like, well, you look so fired up. I'm totally relaxed. Like, I could, like, if I stopped in that moment, I could be screaming, and then you could say, hey, Adam, what do you think about this particular whatever it is? And I could literally say, this is an excellent question. It's not time for that right now. Let me take care of this, and go right back into the zone. It would be that easy for me to do. Like, so I'm actually super relaxed, and so I get fired up, and then I'm into that mode, and I go into the circle. Once I set my feet, that's again where I get to, like, the perfect. That's like I need to be. That's where I need to be, like, ice, and then once I get into that mode, like, it takes care of itself.
Was there times in practice where you got going like that?
So in practice, no, because I needed to have more of a dialogue with my coach. I needed to be a little bit more aware of my environment and just kind of work through things. But we create a plan, and I started executing. The closer I got to a major championship, the more I try to replicate whatever the major championship event was going to be like. But I would practice this stuff. Like I would literally have, spend an hour, at least an hour a week doing a guided visualization or a sports therapist session with people that I work with, I'd probably spend, I don't know, maybe 30 to 45 minutes a day, which people think that's not that much, but when you're doing visualization, you're really trying to get in the mode, like spending 30 or 45 minutes when you're pretty good at it, like that's a lot of time. Yeah. The mental reps that I was able to do during that time and the visual, like the detail that I was able to add to this person, it's phenomenal. And that's really the secret of it. It's not, a lot of people are like, that's kind of hokey. Like I do that stuff. I think I'm a giant. What does that giant look like? What does he wear? How does he enter the room? How does he interact with people? You're developing a character. So if I were to sit down and describe any one of you guys, if I were doing a superficial job, I'd say, well, Chad is, he's a big guy.
Handsome, beautiful eyes. Go on.
Dreamy. Yes. Cute little ears that are too small for his head.
Well, are the ears too small or is the head too big? Who really knows?
But my point is, like, it's the detail that matters, and it's the detail with everything that matters. When you're designing a training program, okay, anybody can throw down sets and reps on a piece of paper, but it's the details of how you pull that all together. If you leave details undefined, it ends up creating an inefficiency in your programming or an unknown result. And so the more detail you can add to this character, and I mean, I probably should have in hindsight, but I never literally wrote down a full description of this character. It was all upstairs for me, all virtual, if you will. But like I could tell you everything about this person. I could tell you how, and then ultimately as I got more, it's kind of like creating a alternative personality. So maybe that's the secret, is to be mildly schizophrenic or something like that.
I think the big takeaways there, I think, for a powerlifter, a weightlifter who wants to get, who wants to ride this line of as fired up as they can be, but not too fired up to disrupt their technique, I think it's not for all the time in practice. Practice is, right. Training is for practicing the skill, and you have to be a little bit more calm to do that. And if you were going full Nelly mode, 10 times a week, you would have been really tired all the time, probably.
I'd been burnt out. I'd be overtrained mentally.
Yeah.
Like, it takes its toll on you.